Welcome to another edition of Voice of the Diaspora. I'm your host, Norman Brung. In studio with me today is Apostle Nigel London of Core Ministries. We have Mr. Jason Benjamin, a former GDF, Guyana Defense Force officer, and of course an academic, a former University of Guyana graduate who was also the student president of the university. Mr. Bevon Wint's popular Guyanese, Bevon Wint, popular Guyanese, overseas-based Guyanese, and a very prominent Londoner is here with us also. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thank you for having me, and greetings to all.
Welcome to the program, Jason.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I just want to use this opportunity to remind people that our lives begin to end the day we become stars. So again, thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome, Mr. Wint.
Well, I just want to take the opportunity to say something personal about yourself. For all those years, we've been brothers in Half Mile, Kansas City area, Westmoreland, Linden. I have to say that I admire you from afar and also from a near. Your crusade, your crusader for change, your trailblazer for change. And for this, I've seen the type of work you've put out. Matter of fact, I think you was one of the architects that bring about the type of changes that was necessary in the election that bring about the APNU and PNC government together in a coalition. So I really respect the type of work you do, and I just want to wish you well.
Thank you very much.
I keep on doing what you're doing, brother.
Thank you very much. Of course, today is about you guys, and we are all collectively in this struggle. We are all showing serious interest in the development of our country and ensuring that our people can have a prosperous life in a nation that is pregnant with wealth. Let us go straight into the program. We are looking at a Guyana today that is controlled by the People's Progressive Party, a government that has entered office about approximately 6 months ago. And we have seen manifestations of things that we may believe are unpleasant in our society. And those are things that we wish to address. But we want to kick off this program. We would like to kick off this program by discussing this first issue. And we will go to two short clips before we collectively discuss this issue.
So that is it. I can't predict what they will do tomorrow. One thing I can predict, that they will come and eat the food. I can predict that because they come to I can predict that with great level of certainty. And that's not like there's no margin of error, there's no variability in that. That is a 100% certainty. That's almost an even cast in stone. They will come and do that, but I'm not sure about their participation level.
This question of a statement made by Barra Jagdeo about our MPs going and turning up just to eat. It's an obnoxious statement from a person who himself, during the 11th Parliament, if you were to check the records, all he did was to come at lunchtime, eat and leave. He chats a little bit to MP room, have his lunch and leave. And now you're talking about people who are at work, people who are at the National Assembly working, come to this eat. But it has started before now, and we made a complaint to the Speaker. This is why this is becoming so obnoxious. That a complaint was made to the Speaker that Kwame McBoy or McCoy or whatever his name is, correct name is, the honorable member, Minister McCoy, was taking out photographs of the MPs when they were going to take the take their meals in the lunchroom, and posted it on one occasion. And our MPs made a very strong complaint to the chief whip about this matter. So now the Jagdeo goes to speak about it. What it is doing, it is exposing a mindset of him or some elements in the PPP that the representatives of over 217,000 persons who voted for us are all hungry belly. That all we go to do is eat. And that is his mindset. So if he says this about the representative, that is what he thinks of the bulk of this population. And that is how they have dealt with the resources in this budget. But we're not going to let it rest as well. But he is going to understand that everywhere he goes, he will see hungry belly people. Everywhere he goes, they will greet him in this country. He's disrespectful, dishonest, and all the other this you can think about. To sit down there and make such a statement as a member himself of that honorable house, to make a statement about members in that manner. It is dishonorable, and we object to it. We take strong objection to it, and he himself will have to correct that. No Sandancing is going to correct it. No Sandancing is going to correct it. He has to correct it, because people who are not members of parliament are seeing a deeper meaning to his statement. A deeper meaning to his statement.
Wow. Okay. Apostle Nigel, London,
Wow.
we will let you go first, and then Jason, you will be next, and Bevon, you will be after Jason, in that order. And then when you guys would have made your comments, then we will have a little discussion. But I want you to tie what you saw there into the question: will Afro-Guyanese benefit from the oil wealth under the PPP? When we see these attitudes coming from the government, these indicators, as Mr. Jagdeo was saying, we tend to feel
Right.
that there's an agenda against us, and so on. Nigel, London.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to matters that are, of course, this sensitive. And I appreciate I will compliment you for your courage, Mr. Brown, because this requires quite a bit of courage. But what I just saw, and would have been privy to yet again, is in itself not surprising to me, because I expect, or would have expected, us to plunge into this state, given the events and the nature of events that surrounded Guyana from March, or just before March 2020 up until now. It's been a while since I've seen politicians stoop to this level of disrespect, dishonor, and absolute disregard for us as a people. And it has to be because it was encouraged by many. In reference to what you're asking, based on what I just saw, whether the Afro-Guyanese population stand to benefit based on what we just seen, I have no doubt, and though it may sound strange, that Afro-Guyanese, or I should say some Afro-Guyanese, will inevitably benefit from what lies ahead in reference to the wealth in Guyana. The question, though, is the proportion to which you'll benefit. Because if you want to go hard and fast down the line of discussion or presentation here, there's no way that the PPP Civic or any government can totally disenfranchise the people without there being, in this era I'm speaking to here, without there being severe repercussions. So they all know that. The question becomes, to what extent would they give to people? And to what extent would they allow persons to thrive? My advocacy has been for a while that Guyana has to benefit across the board. All Guyanese must experience what I consider to be economic redemption. Until all Guyanese experience economic redemption, Guyana remains, according to me, and these are my views, an absolutely cursed nation. Because any nation that causes one group of people to function by the principle of oligarchy and another people to function by simply being subjects, the oligarchs have an issue with that.
Apostle
And my
Nigel.
position is
Yeah.
clear my position
No,
is
go ahead.
clear that there is an undertone of serious ethnic discord in this country that persons may be too afraid to honestly address, but when they get the courage to do so, it may be a minute or two too late. And we are brewing here, or what is brewing here is a very, very dangerous path that lies ahead of us. And what I can say finally is that wealth can never rescue you from the peril of minds that believe they're being disenfranchised. Wealth doesn't rescue you then.
Thank you very much, Apostle Nigel London. Apostle Nigel London from Core Ministries. Jason Benjamin, what are your thoughts?
Right. Well, my thoughts, it's kind of stunning, even though to me it's not. And I may sound a little duplicity in my statement. But actually, what comes to mind is the whole story of George Orwell, written by George Orwell, Animal Farms. You know, where we see, in this context, where we can see clearly the 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 little clip that you just displayed there shows clearly like if some humans are more equal than others, but it's sad to say that in my opinion, and I stand by what I'm saying here, is that the government proclaims to be absolutely equal to the citizens, but instead they give power and privilege to a small elite. And so there's a disparity in what is being displayed. Mind you, history stands to correct us or to help us to make informed decisions should we take a look back. And to answer the question that you just asked against that backdrop, I am of the view that similar to what Apostle Nigel said, only a small few stand to benefit, but the majority, there will be no equitable distribution. And I'm saying this with the evidence being seen as of now and even the 23 years back under the hardship of that corrupt entity. Mind you, again, I stand by my words. Thank you.
No, I'm gonna think you lost your mic.
You're not hearing you, Norman.
Can you hear me now?
I'm hearing you
Yes.
now. Yes.
Wonderful. Mr. Bevon Wint, well, once again, welcome. You've listened to Apostle London and you've also listened to Jason. What do you have to add? What do you have to add to this discourse in terms of what you saw um, on those two clips? And what, in relation to the question, will Afro Guyanese benefit from the oil well under the PPP? How do you see the scenario?
Well, I'm gonna piggyback a little bit off of what the apostle said. What he said specifically was, Mr. Jagdeo has some oligarchic principle. Mr. Jagdeo is wove in his principle and his policies and his fabric of oligarchic principles. He was studied in Russia. That's where he received his degree in economics. So some of those principles apply in his principal position that he take most of the time in government in Guyana. The problem is that is embarrassing. I'm even ashamed to even listen to what he had to say. From that position of someone trying to eat food, and those are legislators who are supposed to sit at the table and to discuss matters of interest for the larger Guyanese people at large. We're talking about the Indo-Guyanese, the Afro-Guyanese, and we got to remember Guyana has 5 races involved in the entire electoral process. So the notion that black people are going to come and eat food, dissing one aspect of the people, disenfranchising them from not having a seat at the table to discuss meaningful matters is embarrassing to say the least. With regards to the oil position, I think you know my position, our position for years. I I agree with Nigel to an extent where there'll be a small masses amount of people that enjoy from the oil. Whenever a country has those type of deposits of natural resources, you attract international countries like the West. You have England, you have America, you have all over the world is vowing for that resources under the surface of the oil. The problem with that is this: financing becomes a big mega issue. Now, before we gotta be discuss financing, we have to first discuss the feasibility that took place before Guyana become independent. Before Guyana become independent, the feasibility in play as to the riches of the soil that was lying that she was sitting on. Whenever we sign a document, we sign documents with fine print that some of us have to give lawyers to translate those fine prints. Guyana become independent without bloodshed, without firing one round. Guyana become independent by negotiation. America become independent by fighting a war against the British because America did not want to be a part of the British rule anymore. So they fought a war to free themselves from that. But we were given independence by Britain by a document that was signed. What were the fine print of those documents? The fine print of those documents simply probably reads subjectively, your resources beneath your soil does not solely belongs to you. It solely belongs to people that are going to help make some of those decisions into the extraction of those resources. We were given banks. We were given the IDB. We were given the IMF. All those banks are governed by the collective international banking institution in this world. So with that, it says one thing. America and other parts of the world, and we can look at the history, fought wars based on natural resources. They do things like propaganda campaign against governments to overthrow governments because of the deposits of oil. So what does Guyana or Guyanese or Black or Afro-Guyanese has to benefit? Hard question. Because there are layers to what we have to go through to start seeing some sense of benefits. So let's look a little bit, guys. I know the other guys want to come in.
No, take your time.
With oil, you attract big corporations. One of the major corporations you attract is a corporation named Halliburton. Halliburton do the feasibility study, the extraction of oil. You have security firms in Guyana that Guyanese knows nothing about. Blackwater security firms. Blackwater security firm controls and direct all security agents to protect the interests of the Americans and the West. They are contracted by the United States government. Whenever the bank loan money for the extraction of those oil, that money that the bank loan is charged tax by the government itself, which means that the taxes is going to pile onto the Guyana government, and the people of the country are going to suffer that tax burden. The executives is ExxonMobil. The housing of an executive of ExxonMobil comes out of that profit and loss share. The security, Blackwater, money is being deducted. We having lands are being given away to executive of ExxonMobil and other major players like British Petroleum and Shell, and everybody has to have a share of what's actually going on. So the question is, where does the Guyanese people comes in? So let me explain that. The first thing Guyanese people have to understand, they have to go through a re-education construct. It's a collective psychological change to understand the education of how natural resources being extracted, how you grow the gross domestic product, and the distribution of gross domestic product, how it's supposed to work. But now, whenever you have a project, because most companies like Shell, ExxonMobil, and those companies are supposed to sign agreements with the government for social responsibilities. So let's look at social responsibilities. And I think I pull up a study There's a Harvard study from the social science department. It says, what is social development? I'm answering the question by reading it. Social development is about improving the well-being of every individual in society so they can reach the full potential. The success of society link to the well-being of each and every citizen. Social development means investing in people. It requires the removal of barriers so that all citizens can journey towards their dream with confidence and dignity. It is about refusing to accept that people live in poverty will always be poor. It's also helping people so that they can move forward on their path to self-sufficiency. That excerpt from that documentation that came out of Harvard University, it breaks it down. We have under 1 million people in population. And I heard you said that many times in your show, Norman, under 1 million people, each and every one of us who has a Guyana birth certificate, supposed to be walking millionaires. Just off of the minimum profit share, even if it's 20 or 25% of that amount of oil that we are extracting. We have another problem. Who are managing the EPA? We have those departments that are going to manage by corrupt politicians, because the principle of them simply says, if something go wrong, I'm going to give you a couple of dollars. You keep your mouth shut. And that's a normal way of doing business in Guyana. Politicians take payoff, citizens get robbed, and we continue to suffer the tax burden that was placed upon us by the loans that we took, even to the feasibility study, to the extraction of that resources, came through a loan. Any project that Guyanese talk about, which are basically mediocre projects, to say, it have a title, IDB funded project. Now, IDB funded project means what? There's another loan that is connected to all the previous loans that you are indebted to. And there's always a saying in economic theory, who EU controls the money, hold in his hands the destiny of the people. And with that, I hand over back to the other part of the panel.
Wonderful, thank you. Jason, with the international involvement, I mean, these people have explored and they have brought their sophisticated equipment. They tested for the oil. They've invested a lot into the project, but of course, we know that the returns would be more than lucrative for them. What are your thoughts in relation to how the ordinary man and woman, especially in a society where there's ethnic cleavage, in a society where you see the manifestation of a government that is in office, its manifestation of its treatment to black people, in particular, and to poor Guyanese in general, I should say, the acerbic expressions and the shutting out of us in their previous government from the economic and social development program. We are looking at a nation, as Bevon reminded us, that has less than 1 million people, and has oil that makes it as rich as any country on the face of this earth. I'm not even saying in this world. Any country on the face of this earth. Right? What are your thoughts on this situation, and what recommendations or suggestions you would offer that
Well,
the
first,
nation can benefit?
go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first observation is that I don't want to go into the process of everything because my colleague clearly outlined the plethora of events that need to be addressed. But I would like to first go to the root of the issue. And I think the root of the issue has to do with a bad seed being placed there to do planning. Like you and I know, proper planning prevents poor performance. And so when we look at that stage, we recognize clearly that a bad seed cannot bring forth good fruits. And it all comes down to the archaic system that we have in place, which we call government and councils and the different bureaucracies. Because at the end of the day, whomever is there, and as we can see evidently, whatever they so decide and carved out as law, it would affect the people, whether it be in a trickle down effect or not. So the structure we have currently in place needs some amount of restructuring or reorganizing to really capture the man in the street, that they too can benefit from this aspect. The second aspect or the second problem is that the agreement which was signed or which came into being to have this whole resource materialize already on faulty grounds, because I don't believe, in my opinion, that Guyana is receiving a fair share, and so I would wanna steer my argument in terms of answering that question around those two events, because at the end of the day, what we're seeing clearly is there is no equitable distribution as it relates to the wealth being extracted from our country and in terms of finances in return for that. So I have those are my two concerns. Um, we cannot run away from politics. That's one. And I believe that the people who are in control, and I'm not going to call parties, I'm not here to discuss the politics, but we are part of it in any case. But I believe that whomever comes to being need to really tie themselves to selfless service. And like Martin Luther King Jr. says, the time is always right to do the right thing. Unless we come to that state of actually valuing our brothers and sisters and really go beyond a selfless cause for the good and the great of Guyana, that's the only time I see we stand to benefit. The other aspect has to do with the youths. Re-education needs to be an active, an active part of society. And when we look around, we clearly see the magnanimous lies being peddled from all different sources. There's no one side to that. Lies upon lies just to get their way and what's not. So the truth is, the system is corrupt. Now, in terms of a recommendation, how can we bring about such a change? It first has to do with, whether we like it or not, changes being made in Parliament, and that's where everything trickles down from. But to address the issues being outlined in Parliament, we first need to go right back to constitutional reform. And I think if that's the document that we are going to really capture to ensure people fall in line or conform to, that is where the core of issues need to be addressed. And in this way, we can see something by paper where it actually speaks to the man in the street or the entire Guyanese populace having some form of distribution, but in my case, equitable. It doesn't mean if I have 10 things, you have to get five, or I have to get five. It's all about, if you're capable of executing seven and my lot can deal with three, then I get three, you get seven, and we can all think. But there needs to be a restructuring. Thank you.
There needs to be a restructuring. Apostle Nigel London, while we were growing up and we opened the newspapers and read what was happening in the world, it would be like a recurring theme that Western societies would have been in African countries
Mhm.
where they had so much oil, and the images that we would have seen was of Africa, African societies and African people and children living in squalor, you know, diseased and plagued and and Africa appears in those images as a place that is doomed. But the oil was there, and Europe was being built on those proceeds. America was being built on those proceeds. And I recall that we used to like say, why is Africa doing that? It appears today that Guyana in the 21st century is poised to experience that same reality. What are your thoughts, and what suggestions and recommendations you would want to offer in terms of ensuring that as a society and as a people that we benefit from the proceeds equally, that the redistribution of that wealth must be equitable?
I really am excited to address that question or that observation, Norman. I am considering myself to be quite fortunate and blessed to be the one who's asked such a question, because the history about Africa, or Black Africa, I should say, speaks for itself. It happens to be, and I don't want to get into the Europeanized matter about Africa being divided and all of that. Africa as is happens to be the wealthiest continent in terms of resources. Yet it is just about the poorest in terms of the benefits that the Black African people inherit. Guyana is poised to be, on a minor scale, a mirror of Africa, because Africa is an example as to what Guyana is. And what Guyana is, we happen to be a nation that still believe, not we, I'm just saying this for the sake of discussion. For the greater part, Guyanese believe that the best minds, the most wise thinkers are not found on their soil, neither do they possess their skin tone. That's a fact. And because of that issue, Guyana believes that we have to behave ourselves in order to be loved by those who once colonized, enslaved, tortured, and murdered us. And as long as Afro-Guyanese and Africans have that mentality, you can never benefit on the same scale as one who believes that that which is in the ground on which he walks belongs to him and his generation. Guyana was never positioned historically to compete with, debate with, or truly negotiate with the West. Never. Guyana is led by descendants of indentured servants or slaves. That's where history is. There's no book in Guyana, as far as I know, in terms of in school when I was there, that taught me that I was the descendant of royalty or a nation of great people. I was taught that I'm a descendant of a slave. My Indo-Guyanese schoolmates were taught that they were descendants of indentured servants. So none of us had the upbringing that we were qualified to think on a scale of our slave masters and our owners. How then can we negotiate about wealth when we were taught to be slaves? So indeed, education is important, but Guyanese would never benefit truly until Guyanese are brought to a place to understand what wealth really is from our perspective, which would be what I consider to be in discussion here, a redefined, not history, but a redefined destiny. My history cannot be changed. But what I think about the West and what I think about myself now as Guyanese, that can certainly be addressed. And this country shall remain poor because we are not wealthy until we understand that we're no longer sons of slaves. We're no longer sons of indentured servants. We are a people who have the power to say that which is rightfully ours. And if the West decides that we're not going to have what we have, I can promise you that there are multiplied politicians in this country, both of Afro-Guyanese descent and Indo-Guyanese descent, who would do that which I would not want to speak on your broadcast because I'm considered an apostle of the Lord Yeshua. But they will kiss every possible place.
You can speak.
To get what they want. I can speak? Fine. Well, I'll say it in a most dignified manner. They will kiss every possible place to get what they want and watch their fellow citizens of their ethnicity and their nationality suffer, because as far as the Guyanese politicians are concerned, And like the African politicians are concerned, as long as they are benefiting and their families are wealthy, then the country is benefiting. And that in itself is a tragedy. So, Mr. Brown, my recommendation firstly is for Guyanese to stand up and understand that you cannot elect persons who believe that for as long as they're good to Massa and Massa is good to them, the country will be better off. Guyana has to rid itself of this current crop of politicians. I have no political connections, so I could say it exactly as it should be said. We need to get rid of this current crop of politicians. They are not going to help us in the future because they have no interest in the genuine future of Guyanese. Permit me, please, to say something further, Norman. If you look across the political divide of this country, I find it interesting as to when the opposition, whoever they are, chooses to address certain matters. It's very interesting to me that when you are in power, Guyana is heaven. When you are in opposition, Guyana is hell. Within one day, Guyana transitions from being heaven to hell. How could you vote for such people? When the genuine description of you is that unless they are ruling you, you are not benefiting from anything in the country. Guyana, I say again in closing, is a cursed and wicked place with this crop of politicians in it.
Guyana is a cursed and wicked place with this crop of politician in it. Apostle Nigel London of Core Ministries. Bevon Wint, before we move off this topic. Okay.
If you can permit me,
I want to come back. I want to piggyback.
Jason, I will give you a chance to come in as soon as Bevon finishes. Hold the point, and you will have an opportunity to have the final say on this particular aspect of the program.
Thank you.
I want to piggyback off of some of Nigel's points, and you know the point is extremely strong. The problem with Guyana is if you're in the opposition or you're in the party that the present party that governing, you're supposed to have idealistic views. What are your ideology? In my opinion, there are none. The ideology of the ruling party in this position, in my particular, in this particular scenario, is Indo-Guyanese. I represent Indo-Guyanese. The ideology of the AP and UPNC party, in my opinion, is somewhat representation of who represent them. So it's more or less like a partisan idea before progress comes to a particular society or community. We first has to stop that period. Now, how do we stop that? So we got to go into history before we stop that. We got to understand historically, in the 1870s, 1860 something to 1877, when they had the Reconstruction in America, black men was given the right to vote. Black men was given the right to vote. Black people were senators. Black people started building the economy for themselves.
Yeah.
What happened after that? Yeah. It was stricken down by an executive order. A black man went back psychologically into slavery. Now, recently, we had Martin Luther King. I think it's Nigel already mentioned Martin Luther King already had mentioned Martin Luther King. The civil rights movement in 1964 bring about meaningful change, but it came about without bloodshed. It was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of discomfort, and Martin Luther King was somewhat the enemy of the state because he bring about the Voting Rights Act. And from that day to today, a black man has the right to vote, which means he has a voice. He has members of parliament. He has representation in various aspects of the political arena in the United States and somewhat influence around the world. After the Civil Rights Act to current, there was somewhat a dead zone with black progress. To say Martin died and a few guys came around, but it didn't stay for long. But if enough, recently there's a Black Lives Movement uprising. Started with the George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor issues and things of that nature. And I know Nigel will follow this because I listen to Nigel a lot, and he's followed some of these issues. The problem is, how do we fix the current situation in Guyana? No, I'm not pushing bloodshed, but how do we get meaningful changes by literally picking the crumbs off the table of the masters and say please and thank you? America wasn't in 1776. We didn't get independent by begging England for it. It had to fight to get that. How do we get changes come to our tables in Guyana? It's the hardest question to answer. We We have all the different resources, and our people are struggling. We're hungry. We have nothing. Our kids can't go to school. We talk about development. Where is it? I don't know. I've never seen development in Guyana. We're not talking about individual development. Mayor's ward, when there's no running water, there's no street, there's not. I think they just built an outpost, a police outpost. But where's the clinic? Where's the school? Charlie Jagger written in his book, The Western Trial, he says economic development is not only economic growth in the gross domestic product sense, it's reaching the basic needs of human beings. PNC, the APNU coalition, and we got a PPP again, all of those governments have failed miserably in reaching the basic needs of the normal human being. And we talk about like pocketbook and tabletop issues. When are we going to get to that particular point? For too long, we were living a planting chip economy. Guyana is a planting chip, cassava bar economy. I was one of the vendors of planting chip and cassava bar. And it haven't changed. Which, Norma, you and I spoke, I don't know if we can get into that segment, but just a little bit of that. And we spoke about what ultimately bring down the AP and the coalition.
We're going to get to that.
And I think
we're going to get to that because we have a section to deal with the performance and the potential of the APNU AFC within the grand scheme of things that we're discussing. Because the point I wish to make quickly before, I know Nigel wants to say something again and Jason wants to say something again, so I am going to allow another 5 minutes for us to conclude this segment. But the thing is that the question is asked by you guys that, how is this going to change? How could we be different to the realities? How could we have a different reality to what Africa would have experienced and so on? It is in 1 second. It is.
I want to jump back in. I want to jump back in.
1 second. It is in the reality is leadership. The reality in a polarized society where Indian domination is profound, we see African leadership being lukewarm. And so for us to be liberated as a people anywhere on this earth, we have to look at our leadership and whether our leadership is capable, competent, or equipped enough to ensure that we are properly being represented. Every failure of Africans in this world, wherever they are, that failure comes down to what the leadership is capable of doing. Jason, what did you want to
Let me get it before Jason get it. 1 second. Let me get it before Jason comes. Just a little bit. I think I'll piggyback. Jason mentioned something earlier too. I think he actually he's still part of my idea. He said, we talk about constitutional reform. Constitutional reform is the direct building block to affect meaningful change. And we have to understand is the frontal cortex of our brain has to accept those type of changes and refine the education system. Because one of the things constitutional reform would bring is instead we start selecting leaders, we would have the electorate going back and elect the leaders. So the leaders would be directly answering directly to his constituents. And the leaders we have constituents and we have leadership in the constituents to approach and speak truth to power to the men that we elect and not select. That would be the building block of the type of change that we can start seeing, because we understand collectively
Bevon, but I want us to hold that point for the segment in which we discuss. And let me say to you, there will be a discussion for another 15 or 20 minutes on is the PNC, the major political party in the coalition, serious about strengthening itself and base to become a force to be reckoned with in the representation of African Guyanese and Guyanese as a whole, and whether they would be prepared to win another election. That will be a discussion that we will be candid about. And so that's why I cut you, because I want you to hold those points to deal with that in there. You wanted to add something, Jason. Thank you very much, Mr. Wint. You wanted to add something, Jason.
Yes, I just wanted to add, I remember Apostle London spoke on the whole need for this change. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? And actually,
Sure.
in his discourse,
Yeah.
he actually sent my mind back to that of the 15th century, which brings to mind allegory of the cave. And when we look at that setting, we see clearly that one main problem was newness in thinking. You know, as Plato explained what Socrates would have taught him since he was a student of Socrates, he brought back well, he represents an ideal story, but the
Socrates, yeah.
one who escaped the cave and went back brought new knowledge or newness in thinking, and it posed a problem. And so, uh, to really remind our audience that in order to bring about this change in term not by violence thing, yeah, but to bring about this change, we first, I would say, the path out of the valley, yeah, right. The path out of the valley only comes by we choosing to see things differently. And so once we can discipline ourselves or apply that self-discipline to our thinking, of course, each one teach one, then we are at a place where we will be speaking truth to power or truth to lies. We'll be at a position to really stand for what we believe in, which simply says integrity matters. So it all comes with self and not people seeing it the other way, whereby those who are elected really they have the power, but not them.
Yeah.
That's a misconception. The bottom line, the base is what has the power.
Power.
We have the power to elect, we have the power to take down. And until we can utilize the power in a united manner, then we'll be like squandering our pills
Hmm.
just all over the place. So I think that would be a very good recommendation for the people, well, including myself, to actually take upon ourselves to, hey, if I don't listen, if I never like reading, I need to learn to read. Don't just listen to people because they can tell you the wrong things. So it all comes down to self-discipline.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that little
And I
addition
think that
inside
I think that
of
was 1 second. I think that was perfect, and that is going to cause me to ask Apostle Nigel London a question based on what you have said, Jason. Apostle, in a
Yes.
racially polarized society where we see that the unity of Indo-Guyanese and the support for their leadership appears to be blind in terms of regardless what the PvP do, uh, um, their support base would continue to support them wholeheartedly, blindly. Is it fair on our politicians when we are more apt to holding our politicians accountable, to asking them to leave, to saying to them that we need better leadership in a society like Guyana where this battle between the parties, the major political parties, you see that imbalance, you see that playing field that is not leveled. We are calling on our leaders to put their act together. The PPP will go to another elections, and if they kill 1 million black people, you understand? If they kill their own poor people, their supporters will walk into that ballot box and vote PPP. How do we deal with that situation in holding our leaders accountable and not being able to effectively hold the PPP accountable, because we seem to be a society that the PPP does not represent us, that they're not really a part of us in a Guyana in which we all should be one.
Let me hasten to say, Norman, and I know that your question is from a genuine place, but my response is from a genuine place as well. When you refer to we holding our leaders accountable or us holding our leaders accountable as opposed to the PPP supporting theirs, you have inadvertently drawn me into the PNC rap AFC. I know you didn't mean to do it. I am not. I am.
I would not.
I am
I
not.
would not.
I understand.
You don't have a
But
political
but
affiliation, yeah.
I understand. But
I
understand the
was looking
context
at
in
it
which you're
in the
speaking.
black context.
I understand the context in which
Yeah,
you right. I understand the context in which you're speaking. And what has happened is this: how would the two major races or ethnic groups in Ghana, how have they been trained and cultured? The more modern culture that pervades is that you are. I'm speaking from an Indo-Ghanese perspective here, and what I hear, what people are saying on my page, they are not inclined to be led by Afro-Guyanese people because they've been told that Afro-Guyanese people are incapable of leading them. From what premise? They will say, look at the economic status of Afro-Guyanese as opposed to Indo-Guyanese. So their position is from an economic perspective, you cannot lead me. They have never argued holistically from an intellectual perspective. They always go to what do we possess as opposed to what you possess. The Afro-Guyanese society, on the other hand, says this: we are intellectually astute, generally because most of us go to universities and colleges and so on because we think that's the way out of economic straits. So we're saying, based on what we or how we've been cultured, we are more inclined to ask questions that an individual who's not as educated would not ask. Because our measure of leadership is not based on what we have in our pocket, but what we have in our mind. And in our case, it is, are you smarter than I am? If you are smarter than I am, then you're qualified to lead me because you're wiser than I am. Another group says, no, if you're richer than I am, you're qualified to lead me, even if you're not smarter than I am. And once we face that reality, then we're in a tragic place.
Very true.
All right. And the APNU AFC as well have both parties. The APNU AFC or PPP, PNC, whatever you want to call them, they have got hardcore cronies. Look at the recent elections, and I spoke to it. When you've got people who are going to go to the streets 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times to celebrate the victory of David Granger, who himself couldn't come to the street even once, to tell these people we are going to stand because we discovered that there was great discrepancies, and we're not going to relinquish power because we as a people are going to stand. Granger never did that even once. So the APNFC supporters are no different from the PPP because they supported a person. Actually, they worse than the PPP supporters because Granger supporters supported him when he had no voice to speak for himself. Throughout the recent elections, Jagdeo was the leader of Guyana, period. So much so that Jagdeo had the courage to tell them, if you swear Granger in, Ali would be president as well as. That's the first thing we had a parallel state where Jagdeo and Granger would have led at the same time. Jagdeo said, I recognize Irfan Ali as president and Granger cannot lead me. While Granger sat in the seat of political authority, Granger allowed a treasonous statement to be made and he never touched Jagdeo. How you could tell me then that people could still run and support such a person? They are no different from the PPP supporters because Granger was never wrong. Wow. Please forgive my passion, but that one gets me upset. I cannot stand a weak man. He is the weakest of men who's ever led this country. David Granger is the weakest politician that has ever led Guyana. Weaker than Donna Ramatar, if you ask me. Because Ramatar prorogued Parliament and said that you wouldn't vote against me. Granger couldn't even do that. Yet people supported it.
I want to piggyback. I want to piggyback on that. I want to piggyback to this.
Hold on. I think that we have to now go into this other segment in which you can continue because it's
sorry,
related.
Jason.
No, it's now you have
no,
enough.
No, it's fine,
Jason,
it's fine.
one second. Listen, guys, we were to deal with Linden and whether but we'll do that next. But we will have to go straight into the other question that will allow you to continue with your point and allow Bevon to make his contribution and allow the apostle to expand. And the question is the PNC, the major political party in the coalition, serious about strengthening itself and base to become a force to be reckoned with at the next election? Is it capable in opposition of representing and allowing their constituencies to have their due in a society with a government that shows clearly that it does not care about the opposition or about African Guyanese. Jason Benjamin.
Okay, first, I just wanna add a 2 cents. I Apostle London to the up to his latter point, not the ending of it. But I must give credence not because of respect or seniority. Truthfully, I admired Granger's leadership initially with his call of changing the mindset of how the country was going, which was a step away from corruption. And this was actually to give newness in thinking. And when I say so, I meant, or I'm speaking directly to morals as well as ethics. The truth is, um, uh, the truth is about Granger, and I must admit, his leadership became irrelevant. Irrelevant for the fact that, as a military mindset, anyone knows that the first thing you do in any war is try to shut down communication. And once you do that, then you have a possibility of winning your war. What we have seen, and I agree up to the point with what Apostle said, to the point where he knew of fraud being committed on the elections, the vote, stealing of the votes, the ballot boxes, and so on. But at that point, this is where we see people would say absolute power corrupts. And so what we find was that, in my opinion, the Granger had no control over his henchmen because lots of foolishness were undergoing under his own eyes. And so, at that last or umpteenth moment when the nation needed to hear from him, he failed to deliver. And this is the problem we have with failing to communicate effectively. It wasn't a one man show, but he took it upon himself. For whatever reasons, he never to date come out to the public and apologize or anything. And
Correct.
so I would like to just add my point by saying, for the first 3.5 or to 4 years, his leadership was relevant. But it came crashing in the sense that because of his thinking or rationale, and this is more from a philosophical standpoint, as Plato would reminded us that our minds should be, people should be able to, you should be able to listen to people and allow them to tap into those hidden doors of memories so that you can make informed decisions. And there was a disconnect with his leadership and that. And so what we saw was complacency taking him over and making a selfish decision, which placed, and I would say, not only blacks, but other races in Guyana who are not associated to the corrupt PPP suffering at this stage. And so, in itself, this is the technologically advanced era. What he would have done then was relevant at the time, but now it's irrelevant. And so, in my opinion, he needs to step down. This is young Guyanese people time. You understand? And so, to answer the question, I'll open the floor to the others too. To answer the question, should they, the opposition, be a force to reckon with? Under Granger's leadership, it's an absolute no. And that's it. I sit here with a single heart representing many voices at this forum. And so, again, I want to emphasize that under Comrade Granger's leadership, it would be total chaos. We wouldn't go anywhere. And so a lot of young people are now on this platform, and the problem you have is that we only get a front, but in terms of making independent decisions, it poses a problem. So what we have currently needs restructuring and reorganizing. There is a leadership deficit within the opposition sector, and that needs to be changed for any effective change to come about going forward. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. I know, Nigel, you want to come in and respond, but I'll have Bevon to deal with the question. And I repeat, is the PNC, the major political party in the coalition, serious about strengthening itself and base to become a force to be reckoned with at the next national elections and to be able to exercise that capability to represent African Guyanese at a juncture where oppression is beckoning. Bevon Wint.
In general political discourse that we have in throughout Guyana for all those years, there are politicians speak on different frequency of vibration. There could be politicians could eloquently articulate a position and to drag a particular people to support them because they can eloquently express a manifesto or a principle or policies which they want to run on. To answer the question directly, I think we got to move away from partisan politics, but I'm going to speak directly on the political question that was asked. I think if you look at Guyana changing and developing into a country that move away from somewhat the third world status, I think we got to somewhat eliminate partisanship. Period. The PNC and APNU coalition have failed miserably, in my opinion. When they took power, they took power with Guyanese who were fed up with the PPP government for the past 23 years. You was one of the architect of that change. They didn't offer you anything. I know you didn't want to be offered anything, but not even thank you across the board. Just thank you for your support. Not even that. Changes coming about in Guyana, like Jason and I spoke about earlier, has to come collectively from a collective revamp of the education system. Psychologically, you have to be playing on a different frequency of vibration. You can't keep the whole politicians in play with popular faces saying that he might do right or he might not do right. Every one of us has to come to the table, go through a vetting process, allow the constituents to vote us locally, and then before they bring us on the international stage. That's the only way we can know who's going to give us major representation. Matter of fact, in my opinion, I think the name PNC should be burnt. That should be burnt to the ground. That should never resurrect itself again. Because young leaders in Guyana with passion, with integrity, with a vision to bring Guyana into the 21st century, out of that poverty that we were living in for so many years. We can't get popular faces involved in decision-making process anymore. Or else the condition of people are going to continue to remain the same. It cannot happen that way. Partisan politics is destroying Guyana because there's no ideology in place. What ideology are you representing the people from? What are your idealistic views? So I'm going to follow your ideology. And your ideology, that deep principle. And if your deep core
ideology
principle
is partisan
is for the
politics.
advancement.
The ideology is
it's your partisan politics, but it comes from a principled position that I could follow. At this particular point, as we talked about earlier, is either black or white or Indian or black.
It comes from an unprincipled position. Because it's not good for the country, it's not good for the people, it's not good for unity, it's not good for growth and development. Go ahead.
It's not. But the problem is, let's vet the new leaders. Let's put the leaders in a position to make decisions that will benefit the people across the board. If we look at partisan politics, we can always look at it from black and white. We can always see Indian representing Indians. We can always see black representing black. And that experiment cannot continue to happen. Because if we want to look at the greater landscape in the voter population in Guyana, we can always be outnumbered by Indians. So we can't use that technique to say, oh, we're going to hold this person responsible and that person responsible for lack of development because we don't want to come together as a people. The question is, who are going to galvanize the idea? Who is the person going to galvanize the idea of making meaningful changes so Guyana in general could benefit? That is the key question we need to ask our politicians. So the question, who those politicians will become? We talk about it again. We go through the reform. We go through constitutional reform. So we have to change the electoral system in Guyana. We bring the people to the table. We select some of the members who would have to be elected. When we elect those people, then we set ourselves. we would set ourselves, we get the best person giving us representation at the table. And that's including presidential candidates, and that's including the people that represented us in Congress. We need those people to be elected. We understand the president going to have to select. The only selected position the president should be in is to select his cabinet. But in terms of the representative in Congress, should be the representative that the people voted in play. And that's the only way we can get the type of change that we deserve. Because it's a building block, Norman. Every house, you lay the foundation, and you start laying the block before you come to the roof from first. So what are the foundation that we decided the direction we decided to build this foundation? In my opinion, the direction of this foundation is to go through a collective vetting process, select the leaders that you want to represent you, what type of presidential candidate all the way into Congress, put those people through an election process that we, the people, would say, we went to the polls and we think we vote the best candidate to give us the representation to bring about meaningful changes so the entire condition of the Guyanese public at large could be able to benefit from those type of changes that I'm talking about.
Nigel London, Apostle Nigel London, I wanted to ask you this question when we are on the same topic, but we'll have to be very straight now. You are not a supporter of any political party. You're a very principled person. You call a spade a spade. It ties into whether the reality of Guyanese, and in particular African Guyanese, will find a better day in an oil-rich country, that is pregnant with wealth that equals every other country on the face of the earth. We look at this present construct of the People's National Congress as a part of the coalition. It is the major um, party in the coalition. You understand? It is the major party in the coalition. Many people are saying, many young people are becoming awakened. Many older persons are becoming awakened also. And they're saying that there seems to be a paucity in the leadership. This seems to be the time when we have to give young, vibrant leaders the opportunity in an ever modern emerging society where globalization is the thing before the COVID stepped in. But the conversation is being had in relation to this cry. And this cry is in direct connection to the liberation and the access to the things that we need for our prosperity. And I'm just going to be very brief. When we look at the present construct of the People's National Congress, we see something that is very unfortunate. We see that every young leader that would have, after 23 years of PPP hegemonic rule, young visionaries who would have taken that mantle, who would have mobilized, who would have gone into communities where sports was paramount and made young people interested in politics, merged music and popular culture, made politics attractive. We saw those young people like Sharma Rahim Solomon, James Anthony Bond, a number of young people who not only would have concretize a victory or secure the victory for the coalition, but they also were independent thinkers and courageous people who would say to the leader, "You're wrong. You're wrong. We don't agree with you." There has been a culture in our political parties in which it seems as though young, vibrant, independent-minded people would have to know their place, and if they would challenge the status quo, then they are in trouble. If they can win an elections, they have a pat on the shoulder. But that's their duty. That's what they have to do. After that, they're sidelined. Look, let us talk because we've got a few minutes on this topic. Let us bring the reality of people. Let us bring the reality of the situation. Let us talk frankly. How do you feel about this situation?
Sure. And because my interest is in uh, my children's future, I always said it, and the future of the children of Guyana. That's where my mind is at. My mind is not even on this current crop of 35 and over, or 45 plus. My mind is on another generation of Guyanese. And even in speaking to whether the PNC is ready, because I observe most of the political parties, there are two major political parties. Since my responsibility is to speak what is right, not speak to what is politically correct. I said in August, Norman, I think you may recall when I said, or if you don't, that's fine. But I said to the Apnea C coalition, it is impossible, and I'm speaking from my perspective as one who's apolitical. So you can, if you want to win me, then let's say, for sake of discussion, let me see how you're going to function. I said to the Apnea C people, live, it's impossible for you to convince me that you're strong if you tell me that given the recount, there is glaring evidence, and even Claudia Singh admitted to that, of fraud, of irregularities, of gross negligence, probably deliberate negligence on the part of people as important as returning officers. All of that was said. And then you're going to tell me that after making all of those declarations, you accept the position of the official opposition in Parliament? You are joking. You are not qualified to lead anybody. Jaglio said, you're not leading me. Look at the difference here. Jaglio said, you're not leading me, David Granger. Even if they swear you in, you are not going to lead me. I would say Ali's president. Do you recognize the difference here between in terms of strength? Granger said, you cheated me, but I'll name Harman as the leader of the opposition. What are we really doing? How can PNC have any respect from a mind like mine? So you're prepared to accept the position of being opposition, but you won't accept leadership. If you accept opposition, you inadvertently accept the position of leadership, of those in leadership. So by right then, the PNC is not qualified at this moment to generate out of its support base the courage to stand like Jaglio supporters said and said, you would not lead me. Note what happened when Mingo made the first set of declaration. What happened in Enmore? The people went to the street, and for the first time in years, you saw Indo-Guyanese with guns in their hands while APNU AFC is in power, saying, you cannot lead us, or this country is finished. Look at the difference. That was called a fight for democracy here. But when you had a recount, and it showed that there were such glaring evidences, that was not irregularity, that's fraud. Granger said, we accept the position of opposition, and we shall go the route of a petition while we are officially opposition. That is garbage. So that at this moment, there is certainly need, and I say again, for, I even spoke to, and I heard Mr. Gitt spoke to this, Bevon spoke to this. I spoke to the fact that the nature by which Guyanese politicians are set in political power is the most detrimental to the nation's development. We should never have a situation whereby one man says, okay, I'm in power. These persons, you are parliamentarians, come and serve me. How can that be the true reflection of the nature of people? Because the leader may be a good person, or leader and 3 people may be good. But if you win 30 seats in parliament, you can have 29 demons chosen by the leader. But because you're in the same party, we have to accept you. If Guyana doesn't change that, and we elect every single parliamentarian, we are wasting our time. We are not qualified to be led. And the nation's, sorry for going back to this, but it's an important point on this note to show you why our politicians are not ready for this, Norman. Let's go to 2 scenarios involving the West. The West has 2 strategies to remove governments. Number 1, if you notice in Afghanistan, for example, they went to the people. They didn't go to the politicians and said, we have to get rid of these people, take these weapons and fight against these people. In Guyana, they went to the politicians because they know in Guyana the people have absolutely no power. So they will always find those who have the power. If the West empowers the people, the West have informed the people that politicians are a waste of time. You can get rid of them. If the West goes to the politicians, the West understands that the people are jokers. They will holler for 2 minutes and then they run back into the holes and accept whatever you do to them. That's its Guyana at this moment. So the PNC must fashion itself, if it wants to have a voice in this country, to be as courageous as or more courageous than Barra Jagdeo. I'm not saying the PPP here. Barra Jagdeo. A single man brought David Granger to his knees. And unless you can find a leader, and I think there's one, of the ilk like Aubrey Norton, he's one who would look Jagdeo in the face and toe-to-toe tell him, you want to tell me that you want to accept me as president, you go to jail because that's treason. If you want to tell me you would put another person in place to run this country and you want to overthrow the country, you will go to jail instantly. There's no other politician in the PNC who has that courage. Not one. None.
Thank you, Apostle. I want to go straight to Jason. I really want to go straight to Jason.
You know, I'm all edgy. I'm all edgy on this topic.
No, I'm going straight to you because you stopped the David Granger. You stopped the David Granger. As we understand that Mr. Granger is still working in the background and directing things in the party. But of course, the leader.
Granger is the leader.
The leader of the opposition is Joseph Harmon, and when
Granger the Go ahead.
The official leader. The official leader. We know that Mr. Jagdeo is the de facto president. Irfan Ali is the de jure president. But we also, well, you were saying, and I would support it because I am supporting my guests out of principle. You understand?
You don't have to do that. Please don't do that.
Not out of blind loyalty. I am supporting my guests. But hold on, Jason. I'm glad we're having a little laugh. And Bevon, I want you to come in directly after Jason. We're looking at a situation when we would have been out of office. I don't want to say we've lost the elections because it is debatable. Some people say we were cheated and all the kinds of stuff. We don't have the facts, but we are out of office.
The facts were documented, man.
Yes.
The facts were documented.
1 second. You will have the opportunity to say it. But we are the cry and the call for Aubrey Norton to become leader. And that was coming from the ordinary supporters who recognized that Aubrey Norton had played a pivotal role in making the PPP become a minority government, and also making the PPP, being thrown out of office in 2015. Aubrey Norton played a strategic role in that, among others like Sharma Solomon, who gave the coalition, gave Linden to the coalition and so on, and secured a win. But my question to you is this. Norton, after the furore and a call for him to become party leader and perhaps the presidential candidate, was ushered into Mr. Harmon's office, the opposition leader's office, as executive director. And I quickly want to say this because I don't really want to stay long. Sometimes I tend to elaborate too much on my questions, but it's a conversation still. It is ironic that under Desmond Hoyt, when Aubrey Norton was General Secretary, he was a young, vibrant, and impressive one of Guyana's only political scientists at that time. You could have counted them. Dr. Jeffrey and but two others, right, during that time.
Right.
And Aubrey was the General Secretary of the party, and he challenged, in the democracy of the party, he challenged Hoyt to the leadership. And he was called a creature of the party, and was told to know your place. How are you going to challenge a leader? Norton has committed himself from since then to now, regardless of what has happened to him in the party. He has remained humbled and served the party. I want to ask you this question. Would you push for Aubrey Norton to be the leader of the party at any Congress and the next presidential candidate? Do you believe that Joseph Harmon, the leader of the opposition, should step aside and that certain persons in the party, certain people in the party who are seen as capable and competent must take the reins to take us back to 2015 when that energy was there, that we secured a win over the PPP after 23 years?
Excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you.
You already went into some of my talking points, but I'll continue from
I
where
do
you left off.
apologize.
It didn't. It's okay. It didn't. It wasn't finished with Hoyt, but then it went on to where we see Granger became president, and at that time there was a debacle again when it came down to this 2020 version, and here is where we see Aubrey Norton was sidelined again, but then he still remained humble. So you're seeing several different incidents where the same tone was in terms of humility, and that's a good quality for any leader coming forward. I think he was denied. But the issue is he was placed directly within the opposition, the office of the opposition leader. What we're seeing clearly is that Harmon, and let me just stick a pin before I go. Yes, I'm a supporter of the coalition government, but it doesn't mean that I must follow suit or conform to foolish thinking. I'm not like that. I am an educator. I have a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Guyana, not from IFLOT. But in any case, the point is that here is where we're seeing the will of the people is not being honored. And so we found ourselves, I would say the opposition party found itself in a setting where there is a leadership deficit, there is disunity in the camp, and so all of those things are associated to geriatric thinking. This is the technologically advanced era. You have to get people who are coming forward to lead relevant to this technical setting. That's one. The second aspect has to do with Guyana needs genuine leadership or genuine leader, one that speaks with integrity. You understand? The other aspect has to do with we are seeing clearly the budget, for example, and I'm just taking a little dip to make a point. We see clearly that the budget clearly did not cater for public servants. And there was a concern with that. And when the people, the base, the people, the man in the street, began to echo their voices, guess what? One known corrupt character jumped back to say, and allegedly 10 billion is in the budget for people. Indeed, there is none. Here another blatant lie feeding off of the thing. But then, guess what? I use that analogy to show we're still waiting on Harmon, who's the opposition leader, to come forward and give a vocal disclaimer to this issue. So I use that to show you that there is a paradigm shift with the leader of the opposition, in that though he is placed in that figurehead as a surrogate of David Granger, we see more of Granger being continued in that platform simply because there seems to be a disconnect with his leadership and against the bases. But then, when we look at everything, Aubrey Norton throughout March 2nd or from the month of March to August 2nd, Aubrey was the voice of interpretation. Mind you, there was so much unfolding. And so my peers, even in the days when the days when Nigel and I going to church, visiting his church, we learned one thing. One thing we learned. You understand? It is not what you see that affects you, but it is how you interpret interpret what you're looking at.
Not.
And so when we look at that, we see clearly that here is where the will of the people continuously being denied. And so Congress is coming at some point, but guess what? At this forum, I'm going to use it. I fully support Aubrey Norton for that party leadership. You understand? One, it's a voice that connects with the people. I am not looking at, oh, he may steal an apple today and then he asks for forgiveness and this, and you want to throw stains and so on. None of us is perfect. But guess what? Once we step in that place for leadership and we come clean, you come honest, and you come for the people and not for yourself, then you have my attention. It doesn't mean you get my vote, but you have my attention. And so when we look at what unfolding, Aubrey Norton is the most relevant voice to the issue that is unfolding on the corrupt side of the aisle. And I just want to rest it there to allow my other colleagues to pick up from that. But I fully support Aubrey Norton's leadership for the party to take that fire and fight. Mind you, I did not speak to his academic standard. You understand? Even if the autocratics or the academia understand him and the man in the street doesn't understand, guess what? It quickly changes flavor, which shows tact in its presentation
Wow.
to bring it to that man in the street on the spot. And so that's the kind of swift, kind of effective leadership you want to see to bring about some transformation, which can actually take Guyana and every one of us, you understand, as fit in prosperously. But the truth is, we need honest leadership. And at this stage, I fully support Aubrey Norton. Thank you.
Wow. Bevon Wint, you would have heard the discussion. I know you're
Is
familiar.
yeah.
Let me just ask the question. I know you're familiar with what is happening. In fact, I've called Aubrey Norton since he became director.
I
1 second. I've called Aubrey Norton since he became director. He's not answering his phone anymore. I know that, I've been very vocal against the leader of the opposition, not Mr. Harmon, but the leader of the opposition. I feel I have a right to criticize leadership. You understand? I would never get personal with Mr. Harmon, and I've never gotten personal, but I think that our leaders are subject to scrutiny. And I see a pattern in which, some people are not answering their phones anymore. And I mean that. I'm not saying that loosely on this program. I'm saying that very serious. I've called Aubrey several times. He hasn't returned my call. I know that I'm unpopular based on what I'm doing in calling out the leader of the opposition and in trying to say to the party that you have to be accountable and you have to be transparent with your base and with your support groups and also with your constituencies. And nothing will go down in secrecy. There will be no party machinery that calls the shot and be unjust to people who are deserving in that party. We are moving away from that. We're moving away from that. Bevon, when you look at the leadership of the PNC, when you look back at the history, the recent history in which Aubrey Norton, Sharma Rahim Solomon, Christopher Jones, James Anthony, but regardless of what people say about these people, Vanessa Kisoon, Simona Brooms, you look at the stalwarts and you look at people, this is not about popularity. This is about after 23 years of PPP hegemony, when the old guards in the PNC couldn't do anything to remove the PPP, young people came out to be, and not only young people in the party, but people who took to social media, who were consistent with the narrative of change, who made sacrifices to see that change happen. And then lo and behold, they were all sidelined. In fact, they were all seen as pariah in the eyes of the leadership that was there for over 4 or 5 years. Bevon, when you look at the oil in Guyana and you look at ineptitude of our political party in terms of its representation to black people. And we're not going back on the oil subject, but what do you suggest happens,
Well,
almost immediately?
well, the subject matter here is leadership, and it's indicative for us to understand the fundamental principles of that word. A leader is one who actually elected or selected to bring about meaningful changes for the people them that elect or select him or her. Because changes is one of the things that we have to be able to embrace. If a leader cannot bring about changes, they are symbol without substance. It makes no sense whatsoever. Aubrey Norton, on the other hand, he has a lot of political equity. He's very brilliant. He's a smart man. And I think what actually happened with Aubrey is that, like Jason said, he's one of the guys like us, in my opinion. He's a guy who could make the adjustment in communication. His delivery is efficient and effective. People understand the way he put the stuff together in the sense that, to layman terms, we know what he's always about. Vanessa Kissoon, she's a trailblazer like yourself. Shama Solomon, his father is a very good friend of mine. He did a tremendous job in toppling that regime that was in play for 23 years that oppressed the people of Guyana. But the problem is, we have to fundamentally understand how we could fix this. We talk about the reform. We have to bring those people, all those names that you just mentioned, into a discussion, and then we could have a runoff. I don't think one person could say we have the popularity contest anymore. Out of every name that just called, Aubrey Norton has the most political equity to carry the standard. But let's bring him in a collective discourse, and as a runoff, the people must be able to select that next leader. And once the people select that next leader, you sit and you discuss the major issue at hand. Debate those issues. So with those issues being debated, it could create the manifesto of that next leader that would represent those people in the next general election. In terms of Armand, I don't know much about him because I leave Guyana a very long time. I wasn't following Guyana politics. I certainly got to come to you. I ask you a few questions about those guys. But according to what I understand, he was already being corrupted by Charlene issue, in my opinion. And there's a lot of other things going on in that old guards aspect of things. But I'm in favor of Aubrey Norton. I follow his story for a very long time. I know his political equity. Unfortunately, it's not getting back to you and so on. But I'm still going to stick with my position. We have to bring every one of those names to the table of discussion and then elect through an election the best candidate that would represent us. That's the only way we can be able to have change, because we will start talking earlier about the type of economy that Guyana been experiencing for so many years. The question is, what type of changes do we need to see? Do we need to see very slow changes that we're gonna die not even experiencing, or do we need to see massive changes because the economy is leaning in that direction financially? We could challenge them. We have the resources to challenge them. The question is, as we talk about oil just a little bit, where are some of the profits from the oil windfall that should benefit the people of the country? Basic normal economic question. The only person who can answer that question is a competent, honest, and a leader with integrity, who first choose the people and not himself, who first chose the people above partisanship. And we have to stand up and hold them responsible, because you know why we could do that? Because we didn't select them. We elect them through the collective electorate of the country. So we have the right to step in and say, hey, we're not seeing things are going a certain way. Because at the end of the day, in a democracy, the people are the one in power. The people are the ones in power, and not the quote-unquote individual who's standing there as a so-called leader claiming to represent the people, which he becomes a symbol and not substance, because he's not delivering on the promise of the court manifesto that was negotiated by the people around that table, whether they are winners or they are losers. Because if we have 5 names in play, bring the 5 names. Their ideas of all these 5 leaders would be on the table. We could document all of them. We take the best idea, then we do a runoff, and we're going to select that one. With all those ideas that come together, we have to factor them in. We have to factor the ideas in, and then we construct the manifesto, which would now be the architect of leading the party to the next general election. Wow. And we have to have the inclusion of our people. Because if we want to talk about race politics, we would never be able to defeat the PPP government. Never. So we have to have the inclusion of all people in the discourse. So once we have those type of dialogue and we come up with the type of things that we can be able to say, hey, this person have the best policy, we vote this person in, then we have to holistically go with that person to the poll. Okay. With that, we should be able to see some type of changes coming to the regular grassroots. Because we have, the biggest problem we have in Guyana now, we have these discussions on the internet, on Facebook, and all these social media platforms, are because we are not reaching the basic needs of the human being. Grassroots information, food, clothing, shelter, proper school, education. We are brain drained by the intellectuals of that country. Journalists are not being protected in Guyana. Journalists can't ask certain questions. Journalists cannot be deep investigative reporters because it's a risk. So you have draconian leaders are put in place, and also you have people in draconian leaders to sit in parliament. And the parliamentarians has to understand their responsibilities. So what are the responsibilities of parliamentarians? The responsibility of parliamentarian is to represent the people at large, the Guyanese people, which he or she is sitting on that seat to represent. Because all of us can go in Congress, 800 people, 800,000 of us can go in Congress and hear our voice. That is why we talk about constitutional reform, to elect those people, to put them in place so they have our voice. They have to answer to us because we're going to vote them out. That is transparency at its maximum. And then Guyanese will have to understand how monies are being appropriated, which is important. You cannot fight the system if you know nothing about how money are being appropriated for your constituents, for development, for programs, social and also economical. How could you fight if you lack the knowledge and the foundation in which you create in this battle? So all that is a part of the collective re-education process that the electorate would need to go through in order for them to start affecting meaningful changes
and I'm sure,
in Guyana.
And I'm sure that is a wonderful delivery, Bevon, and I'm really, really touched by the way you made that presentation. It's passionate and it's straight to the point. Apostle Nigel London, you are an independent thinker, and you're a son of Linden soil. You're Guyanese. We have seen a situation uh, where after the coalition would have been removed from office, let me choose my words carefully, removed from office, justly or unjustly, there seemed to have been some sort of rush without proper consultation with the masses or with the party, the central executive of the PNC, and so on, where new faces were brought on board to become members of parliament, sorry, that no one knew about, that never existed anywhere on the political trail before. We couldn't identify with any one of them, and the majority of them were placed there for some particular reason that we don't know. We saw an opposition leader is very lukewarm, who is very lukewarm, and who has, and I'm being very straight on this program, who has in the public opinion, and opinions can be fact when it is garnered and supported by the masses. You understand that opinion can form a basis of fact that people
I guess.
saying no matter what you say. We have seen the leader of the opposition being accused of being an Indian businessman pocket, being being very uninspiring, also being someone, as Jason would say, that is too old. He's used an intellectual term, you understand, but we've seen all of these things. But we've also seen the sidelining of powerful figures, younger professionals that made that election in 2015 possible after 23 years. That's history. That's history. When you examine this situation, Apostle, when you examine the situation of the leader of the opposition being there and looking at the situation in which, and I want to reveal something to you and then I'll let you speak.
Sure.
Information came to me yesterday, sorry, and it states that no preparations would have been made for Congress in April. Congress decides the way forward. Is this an insult at a time when we are down on our faces? Is this an insult to our constituencies, our base, that there's no transparency, there's no respect for the vision of putting the right people in place early so that we have a running chance to at least be triumphant at another elections in which we can balance the wealth to benefit every Guyanese. When you hear these stories about Congress not even being planned, we are in late February. Well, we are in February, mid February, or somewhere in February
Yes.
for early February. But you understand, to plan for Congress, it takes a while. Nothing has been done. I've been told by people in the hierarchy that they don't even know if Congress is going to happen in April. Are we seeing a hogging of leadership without the care of whether we are properly represented at another election?
Interesting question and interesting view. What I would like to believe, or I would like to suggest, would be the explanation regarding Congress for the PNC would be that is the pandemic. So you cannot really plan such a massive gathering, and of course there would no be no virtual voting and the rest of it like would have happened, or voting from via mail as Trump and Biden situation turned out to be so disastrous. So they have an excuse that is certainly going to be valid in that you cannot gather in such large masses, so we shouldn't plan for something that won't happen in 2 months. But that aside, the manner in which Orbie Norton was, or the present crop, the current crop of PNC parliamentarians would have been selected, spoke to great disregard for the faces that fought. And I would like you to hear me carefully here.
Yeah, go ahead.
From March through August, there were certain faces that were dominant on the scene in reference to representing the people. Not that I represented any one of them, but I'm just saying there are certain faces that were there, and politically speaking here. Walter Lawrence, James Bond, Brooms, Orbie Norton was the key person in reference to authority who spoke and could really reach international and local journalism, journalists, and so on. And there were other names, of course. Now, when you find a situation in which certain faces were representing you, and then those faces, for the greater part, are eliminated, immediately you're looking for trouble. Because the persons will relate to the faces they heard, the voices they heard frequently when they were most desperate. and to swipe those people away and just throw into parliament persons that I have never known existed in Guyana. How can people say that you're serious about the way forward? So Granger himself said that he is out of, or he's taken a step away from politics, but yet he could name the person to lead the party in reference to opposition leadership. That is an insult to my intelligence. And I'm not a party member, but I'm saying as a Guyanese, I'm being insulted because I have interest in my country's well-being. And if you're going to seek to insult me to that degree, I will have disinterest in what you have to tell me. And what has happened here is that the second thing is you've got the chairman who is more popular than Granger in the person of Walter Lawrence. This is historical. When you're going to have the chairman of the PNC being sidelined for parliament. So the person who leads your party in terms of the chair has no power in parliament. I believe with all of my heart. And because I don't have political affiliations, I can say this and be hated because I love being hated. I believe with all of my heart that David Granger may have had two plans. One, to secure his pension as president, and that was accomplished on the moment he was elected. So he's set for the rest of his life. And secondly, to ensure that there's no other leader who can challenge his perceived legacy in the PNC. Because his decision-making in the latter part of 2020 or early 2020, up until Harman and others, it made me think or wonder whether he even processes. And I kept asking on social platforms, does Granger have advisors or does he heed advice? I think he has advisors, but he doesn't heed advice because there's no one who can tell me that a man who heeds advice will eliminate the chairman of a party from parliament and then remove the most popular faces who led the fight when he was in what people call State House hiding. This is unheard of. And finally, it seems as if there is an internal effort to destroy the PNC by those who believe that they are incapable of leading it to victory again.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
I can
thank
hear
you
you.
very much. Thank you very much, Apostle Nigel London of Core Ministry. Ministry is a very outspoken leader, a very frank leader. We're wrapping up now. We've got about 15 minutes left to deal with two other topics, and we have to be very brief because we're running out of time. Jason Benjamin, I recognize you as an academic. You have excelled in higher education. You didn't go to the Highfield College, I suppose. You went to the University of Guyana, and so that you have earned your stripes. You've been a military officer, I think, in the Guyana Defense Force. I think you would have gone through the ranks. I don't know what position, but you went up really high to some extent, and so you understand discipline and you understand order and everything. I want to ask you this question, and I want Bevon to take about 2 minutes also, just a little about 2 minutes before we come on the topic and go into our other brief topics. Norton has been appointed executive director in the office of the leader of the opposition when when calls were made for Norton to be leader shortly after you know, the coalition would have been removed from office. Those calls were very strong. They were very, very, very strong, and they gained traction quickly. Many have blamed me for instituting that call, but I don't think I did. I think others were collectively making that call and understood the reason why they should make such a call at a time when we could not, after 23 years, even hold the government for 10 years. The most disgraced politician on the face of the earth in modern times is Donald Trump. You understand? And he could not make it, you understand, to another term. And one can understand why. Um, and at the same time, or around that same time, David Granger, who is, you know, outside of the weakness of real politic, he would have acted statesman-like in terms of policies and so on, and his vision for Guyana. But there can be no vision if there is no longevity. You understand? And we have seen that happen. Jason, do you think it's deliberate? It's a deliberate strategy by the leader of the opposition to quickly take Aubrey Norton into his wing, under his wings, into his own office, to make him an executive director, to keep him there, to say, like, you know what, he has a position, but I'm the leader of the opposition. When the people, the will of the people, is saying we need Mr. Norton as leader. Is that glaring? Is it blatant? And we are seeing also that the leader of the opposition does not have the oomph. You understand that sort of spirit, that drive, that to whip people up and to climb that mountain that is laborious. You understand? And we are seeing ourselves going along going into next few years with not much hope. What are your thoughts? What would you like to say to the leader of the opposition? What would you like to say to Mr. Norton? What would you like to say to the diaspora, the people at home, and to the party supporters on this particular matter?
Well, quickly, just to get directly to the point. The first thing is that from a military standpoint, anyone would have known that he who moves is at the mercy of he who sits and waits. And when you examine that kind of rule, a rule for life, you clearly recognize that one, Comrade Granger operated out of haste and on a selfish note. And I want to repeat it again, operated out of haste and on a selfish note, because he failed to communicate with the remainder of his team to take proper advice, and he did not heed. He called the shots. At least he never came forward publicly to state otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So against that, what we've seen was that we saw from the Aubrey Norton side where, okay, there is contention with the people are calling for him to be the opposition leader. We also know of Harmon being Granger's surrogate.
Yeah.
And so we also see, I'm not a supporter of either Valda nor Harmon, but I'm just going to call it out as I see it. I believe in speaking truth to power. What we've seen was that a female being denied her rightful position, meaning that there was always a policy or it became a legitimate expectancy where whomever holds the chairmanship of the party automatically goes as the presidential candidate and what's not.
Precisely.
But then we also saw where, and I would say tactics, but of course outdated tactics, because you do not treat women in that manner. So one of the first things that that appealed to me was that we find even in the highest of hierarchy, people failing to treat women with the highest of pedigree and commit fully to integrity, do what is right. And so we saw Valda Lawrence being sidelined into this whole animosity and the disunity trickle down from then on. And then we find Harmon, in my opinion, was handpicked by Granger to carry on the Granger's legacy. That's how I see it.
Wow.
The other part of it, as it relates to Aubrey Norton, we see one, for any leadership, a leader must have humility. A leader must have tact. A leader must be able to connect to the grassroots. You understand? And so what he did, like generally any human being, You deny me a position, look, I end, cut ties, and move on. He didn't do that, and this is a continuous behavior. It's not a first time.
Okay.
So what we clearly see was that someone who's willing to right wrong, put it that way, right wrong, you know, okay, but willing to go above and beyond for the sake of the people, the grassroots people, you know. And so we saw Aubrey took that stand and was willing to meaningfully contribute. So though, in my opinion, though the office would deliver verbatim,
Mm.
effectively, it's not what is in the message that matters. It is a matter of who carries the message, the source of propagation. And so,
Yeah.
even though good things would be forthcoming, you find that a modulated info goes through the conduit. But then, when it's processed for the grassroots to demodulate, there is a problem. If you don't have the right medium, close as friends or allies, then you don't understand nothing. You just as, oh, hey, 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 and that's it. And that is not what should be. So, as a result of that, and I'm speaking truth to power, as a result of that, it is evident publicly that yes, you have good source materials coming out, but the opposition leader, in his delivery, there is a direct disconnect with him and the people. You understand? And there is where you find that indeed the people again are calling for Aubrey because that's the voice they can connect to.
Yeah.
You understand? And
Yeah.
so, in my honest opinion, you can even put a gun to my head, it doesn't matter. Truth will always prevail, facts will remain facts. You understand? If any one of us want to be honest or you want to really make a change or a step in the right direction going forward, you have to stand for truth. You have to
That's good.
hold to facts. There is no if, no buts about that. And this is why I am always saying, you understand, that the only time Guyanese or the base can really make a change, they have to choose to see things different. And so, against
That's
that
good.
backdrop, Aubrey Norton indeed is the will, represents formally the will of the people. The problem I'm seeing currently, I know you did mention about the COVID and so on, but again, this is where we see this is the technologically advanced era, and though things can happen virtually, the question remains: what if COVID is here for another 5 years? Should we say no Congress for next five
No
years, just we
Congress.
go into election just as that? Then that would be total. And so the bottom line is that the geriatrics need to realize your time back then was relevant. Going forward, it became irrelevant. And so, newness in thinking, an independent mind, working together with and through the people for a common objective, that is what you want. And when you look around, we see clearly that Aubrey Norton represents that material. As it relates to the diaspora, you know, I know we may share difference in opinion and what's not, but the truth is, Guyana is at a crossroad that needs us. And in order for us to give meaningful support, whether be it in whatever form, we first need to be truthful to ourselves. One love, one people, but we get different destinies if we hold truth to lies. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that was beautiful. You are tuned into
Indeed.
Voice of the Diaspora. In studio with me today is Apostle Nigel London of Core Ministries, Jason Benjamin, who is an academic and a former Guyanese military officer, and Mr. Bevon Wint, who's a very popular Guyanese and a very popular overseas-based Guyanese who has his roots in accountancy. You are here. You would not hear it from anywhere else. This candid. It is the first time I have seen so many comments on the comments thread. I'm really honored to have you guys on this program. I'm being honest. I've never seen so many comments on my comments thread. We are going to wrap up. I will have to skip because I think I will have to bring you guys back on next week. We'll have to skip the issue with will the development of Linden
What?
come anytime soon, and what must be done to ensure it does. What we're going to do is to go straight into the next question. But before we go into the next question, I wanted to say to the apostle, and Jason, I saw you touched on it. COVID should not be an excuse for very urgent national matters and matters that determines our longevity as a people. I'll tell you why. When the PPP Civic locked out, Atlanta locked out the opposition members of parliament. We saw the clip earlier, what Mr. Jagdio said, but they were actually locked out and the police was unleashed on them, and they had asked persons to come out in bus loads. They asked Linden for people to go down there too. There is an internal WhatsApp group, several internal WhatsApp groups that would have these exchanges. And as someone who has a public forum and people feel that I'm defending and representing a just cause for African Guyanese and Guyanese as a whole, not a party hack, but to say, you know what, if the party is not intact, African Guyanese are not intact. And those people would reach out to me, and they said that the party asked them to come out and support in their busloads the protests outside of the convention center on Thursday at Lindal, the day before the budget would have been read. Nobody paid any mind to it. Nobody really paid any mind. And I don't believe it was because of COVID. I feel people are tired and fed up, Apostle, of the constant abuse that is placed on them through weak leadership, through the disrespect of their cries and calls. How could a nation disrespect its supporters? How could a party, disrespect its supporters in the way in which the supporters are saying, this is what we want, because we don't want it because of popularity. We know that this person is tried and proven time and time again. You understand? These persons are tried and proven time. This is not a popularity contest. It is men who would have walked and delivered after 23 years and were sidelined and put in place for those old leaders to go there and make a mess that we are now back in the political wilderness. So, say to me what you want to say. Then we go to Bevon for 2 minutes. We go on the next subject and then we wrap up. So we got about 15 minutes left.
Just 5 seconds. I'm saying, and I would have said that the expected excuse, I know what they're going to say. I promise you. They would say they were not going to hold Congress because of COVID-19. When Harmon was about to file a petition, he said all of the supporters must come and join him. In the midst of COVID-19, he called people to come out and join in mass. But I'm promising you to avoid having a vote or a runoff for leadership of the PNC, they will say it's because of COVID. It is inexcusable. And again, they shoot themselves in the foot repeatedly. Why? The lack of leadership. The issue in Guyana is not a people issue. We have a political issue. Guyana does not have true modernized political leaders. We've got persons who believe that a system that worked in 1975 can work in 2021 on both sides. However, the change that you're seeing, and I'm going to speak quickly to the comments I'm seeing as well, Mr. Brown. Yes, Norman, I'm happy to see so many people commenting because I don't have an issue with person disagreeing with me. And persons are of the view that we are here to more or less bash and erode the image of APNU AFC. I think persons have not yet realized or accepted that although I appear to be an APNU AFC ethnically qualified person, I am apolitical. I have nothing to do with political parties in Guyana because they are disqualified from my even considering to deal with them based on their ideologies. You cannot bring me to a place in 2020, according to Pope Gregory School, I always say, you can't bring me to this place whereby at this stage, at 47 years old, with children in my life, where I have to accept a man telling me whatever he says, and if I say to him, you're wrong, I'm considered one who is destroying the party. That is why I would say to those supporters saying that to me tonight, that PNC will stand to lose because your view is that we are not supposed to disagree with them on a public platform. We must do this behind closed doors and give the whole world the impression as though we are united. When the Democrats can have democratic debates and they beat each other up on international television, then it comes down from 15 to 10 to 5 to 3 to 1, and they say, we support you. After they had all those fights with Biden and old boy, feel the burn, Bernie Sanders, they united and said, well, now we can go forward. Guyana's politics isn't like that. Guyana's politics is do not speak against the party publicly, lest you be considered a Judas. I see, Norman, certain comments being made even directed towards you, as though you are on a mission here to destroy the PNC. And if that is the thinking or the paradigm of PNC and our two supporters, you are bound to lose forever, because you're not qualified to have independent thinkers lead you. And out of your crop of leaders you now have, you're testifying to me that you've got persons now in your party, in parliament, who are just yes people and not leaders.
And I'm happy that
you can never take the country forward.
I'm really happy that you said that, because I'll say this, and I want to make this very pellucid. This is your program, guys, and of course you see you've got the floor and so on, but I want to make this very pellucid. I want to make this very, very pellucid. My first love in this sojourn of 70 is for Black people, especially in the condition that they are in my country, and the condition that they're in the wider world. I have argued with myself the reason why I have come in this skin, and I've committed my life to fighting for the liberation of Black people. I have decided that if I didn't make a penny out of anything, I'm justified for 30 years, 25 years of feeling satisfied that this struggle that I've embarked upon and engaged in is an honorable one, it's a noble one, and it is one that when I am ready to close my eyes, I will remember the Black woman that nurtured me, that fed me. And I owe African Guyanese, that depth of gratitude for the love I received from my own to see me where I am today. And I will fight tooth and nail. I understand the complexities, Bevon, I'll bring you in just now. I understand the complexities of where we are at as a people. The police under the PPP are now harassing Black people. They've just shot a young man in his eye. Everybody's looking for an opportunity. I understand that to lead Black people or to fight for Black people, you have to love them more than life itself. Because if you are an imposter, the first week you stand up for Black people, what you would have experienced from Black people would make you say, I don't care about them. And I have this firm feeling that many of our politicians, through the process of time, have earned power or gained power against the backdrop that they shouldn't care about Black people. You understand? And so I wanted to make that point so that people can understand. My struggle in this sojourn called life has no respect for any political party, Black, Indian, or white, or any political party or ethnic group that is dealing with issue. My struggle, I must be counted in this life for standing up for a people that are oppressed, that are rejected, that are despised, that in every society that they are in, they are suddenly put in a box for them to understand that you are the bottom of the social ebb of the ladder, or the bottom of the social ebb, social and economic ebb. When I walk in this society, I am not looking at my enemies or my oppressors. I am looking at my vanguards to see what they are doing to confront those oppressors and make a better day for me. And I will tell you this, I
That's
have
good.
heard the comments, I have seen the comments, and I know that sometimes black people will have to be given a pass because they were conditioned, they were lied to. You understand? They were hoodwinked by their own. You understand? They were misdirected by their own. They were used by their own. You understand? So year after year, the coalition could just say to black people, no matter what we've done to you, the PPP is the enemy. And then black people close
Yep.
ranks, forgetting that truth is very important. What the PPP do to us, if we see our own doing it to us, it is the same wrong. It is the same wrong. And I'm so liberated in my struggle. This program will never be silenced. There is nobody that can offer me money. There's nobody who can think about offering to buy me out. This is a voice of our people. You understand? I've got nothing from doing this, but my love is unconditional. Bevon Wint, I do apologize for my passion, but if we don't put
I
our
love it.
party, if we don't put and I say our because it's representative of black people, you think I got time about party cards and party symbols and all the kinds of stuff? I don't have any time with that. I am looking at the fact of life in which our own have oppressed us. They treated, look. Let me just give Bevon the floor because I do apologize. This program, Jason, is
Don't.
and I really, Bevon, 2 minutes to comment on this.
I kind of love the passion, man. That's who you
Thank you.
are. Yeah. The thing is, majority doesn't determine right from wrong. Your conscience does and love does. There's a new idea in the global political arena that we have experienced for the past few years. And I'm trying to wrap up quick because it'll be a long. This will get deep.
You got 2 minutes, just 2
We
minutes.
first started I'm going to try to get it wrapped quick. It first started Brexit with an ideology of the whole, try to sweep out the new. Second, we had Trumpism, which raises the ugliness of racism in America. And what we actually happening in Guyana is the same draconian strategy that put those two entities actually together. As we talked about earlier, Barra Jagdeo is somewhat a spill-off of the ideology of the Russian oligarchs.
Yeah.
And having that type of ideology and applying that type of principle to the system of governance and election process in Guyana, you would always win because we having one people against the other. So that's a draconian style of management. Indian versus black, they're going to outnumber us, they're going to win. That was the strategy that was being used by Donald Trump in the United States. But they are the intellectuals who come together and make decisions, tough, fight hard. The people in the streets, the young, rise up against that type of oppression. And they said, you know what? We are going to hold our elected representative accountable for the decision-making process moving forward. Now, if you're looking at the greatest democracy in the history of the world, which is in America, literally was on his knees for the past few years under the Trump administration. Question is, how do we know that wouldn't happen again? Now, this is not about America and the diaspora, it's about specifically we're going down to Guyana. So let's bring that into the Guyana argument. They are watching what happened in the global political arena and see how successful they are.
Okay.
Brexit was successful because of that principle. Donald Trump was successful, and Donald Trump has a hold on the people of the United States, which is not the color of our skin, to still vote him, whether he's wrong or even have a fractional right, which he don't right too often. If Jagdeo applies some of that type of principle, and which is a draconian way of doing it, and I heard these guys speak Or Jack, you speak like the clip you played before the conversation started. It was reprehensible. It was disrespectful. But that's the way they operate. They operate under the level of ignorance. There's no intellect as to what it is. There's no intellect. There's no intellectual capacity in the brain for them to speak at a frequency so intellectual people could have a meaningful discourse.
Wow, you got 30
The
seconds.
problem is, the problem is, let's change the old way of doing it, and let's bring the people in the conversation to elect those people.
Yeah.
That would be one of the biggest change that we see in Guyana moving forward. And I'm telling you, it can affect meaningful changes, and we can see some of the changes could start coming from a grassroots level all the way to the top.
Thank you very much, Bevon Wint, popular Guyanese in the diaspora, on Voice of the Diaspora. Let us. I have to cut short the program because you know, we're running out of time. But let us quickly deal with the budget. And this is very brief. Jason, you have 3 minutes, and possibly you have 3 minutes, and Bevon, you have 3 minutes. So that's 9 minutes, and then we will deal with: are we witnessing a return to the dark days of pre-2015 when extrajudicial killings, lawlessness, and corruption gripped the nation? Is the PPP returning with its draconian measures? We need to deal with this topic for 10 minutes, but let us look at this issue. There seemed to be a sort of you know, the budget was read, and as we know, the APNU AFC coalition on the Thursday, the day before the budget was read, they were locked out of Parliament, and not only that they were locked out of Parliament, they were disrespected. The police were was unleashed on them, and you are seeing that if you're locking out the elected representatives from, the nation's building block, if you're locking people out from a budget or from a budget discussion the day before, it means that you're saying to them, you are not a part of the process of our economic, social, and political, you understand, progress, for the want of a better word. But we've seen that, and so we will discuss that issue. But I want to go straight to Jason, and then we go to Apostle Nigel London. The budget, I understand, is 383.1 billion. Impressive. It's impressive. Mr. Jagdiel would have made a subsequent statement that 10 billion was allocated for the public service, and a large chunk of that would be placed in wages and salaries for public servant. The opposition leader is saying that no sort of representations weren't made for the public service in the budget, and so on. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this whole issue?
Well, in truth, I happened to listen to a part of it, and so based on what I would have heard, I just wanna piggyback on one thing which actually sets in motion is that for late Martin Luther King Jr., the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and conveniences, but where he stands at times of challenges and controversies. And so here is where we're seeing a controversial position on the budget. And the truth is, I would have expected more in terms of whether be it vocal or what's not from the opposition, the coalition party. Indeed, some amount of talks would have been forthcoming. But what we are seeing is where, in my opinion, and again, speaking truth to power, what we are seeing is the greatest resource in any nation should be humans. But what we're seeing is a budget, though a magnanimous size of $383.3 billion being presented. What we're seeing is roads and on other infrastructure being placed with more priority over human beings. And I have a problem with that. That is wrong thinking right away. Again, I also remind our audiences that a bad seed could never bring forth good fruits. What we're seeing is when the people push back in terms of, okay, the alarm raised that, okay, nothing is catered for public servants. We already saw a draconian political politicking kick into gear, of course, by the vice president, put it that way. And we're seeing a $10 billion were catered for public servants. The truth is, throughout the presentation, nothing was mentioned. So I would consider that as just mere flabbergasting, and that you need facts. We need facts to justify that. Show the budget to show where that clause in catering for it and that. But holistically, we already have an uneducated president or fraud Hali, right? And so what we're seeing is that you don't have to expect nothing good coming from out of that. Yeah, it's possible you can get something good, but it has no lasting impression, all because the source is corrupt. You understand? He's unable to deliver on his own the will of the people or to do things. He has a perfect opportunity to bring this country together and go above and beyond to make a difference. But because of his illiteracy and arrogance and being pulled by the Jagdeo string, he's unable to do likewise. And so the budget in itself, when you extrapolate, you see all these different fandanglings coming out as a way of appeasing or playing sentiments to people's emotions and what's not. And that in itself is unacceptable. People should be the priority, the greatest resource, humans. And so the budget in itself should have speak more or should have spoken more to the upliftment of the people of Guyana. And that's my input for now.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Before I go to Apostle Nigel London for him to elaborate a bit more on this particular subject, it's very serious. Let me go to a clip of what the leader of the opposition had to say.
This question of a statement made by Barra Jagdeo.
Sorry, I didn't get to get that clip. I think there's been a bit of
Service. There's nothing in this budget for the public servants. There's nothing here. A very skimpy amount for frontline healthcare workers. And so what you are seeing is that even though this is a vision, you have the objective set, nothing is here for the public servants. And this is so because we believe that it is a policy almost on the part of Barra Jagdeo. He said it at one of his press conferences, that though the public service is too big, they have to send home people and they will replace them. But what are they doing? They have sent home over 1,500 public servants. And they've sent home highly qualified persons. So you tell me now, how is this objective to be achieved? By dismantling a public service, a high quality public service which we took a very long time to structure and to build, that he is just dismissing and sending home people left, right, and center. But as I said at one of my conferences, that after this period of firing and locking up is finished, they have to get down to the real task of building Guyana. And this is that phase. This is where they're failing miserably. You have an economy that is well positioned by us. All you have to do now, you're set to take off. But what they're taking off with, you are building a of structure that the foundation is weak. For example, the public service, page 4 is this budget. Let me speak a little bit to that because, as I said, I will deal with the others later on. The minister says that we'll improve the quality of the public service, and this is important to public servants. But in the last 6 months, we saw the sending home of the most qualified person to head the EPA. The commissioner of the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, highly qualified person. Dr. Bino from the Petroleum Agency. Staff from the National Data Management Authority. These are the technology people that you're talking about, that you want to improve technology. And several other agencies with highly qualified persons. You say, look, send them home, but there is no plan, at least no discernible plan, to replace them. So in fact, what is happening here, we have a budget here that is a classic tax, borrow, and spend. So you tax, you borrow, and you spend. So in that matrix, the persons who are meant to make this work, the engine, the real engine of government work, the public service, is not catered for. And so...
Yeah. Apostle Nigel, on your take.
Very interesting, and I'm happy that you were able to show what Joe Harmon was saying in reference to the budget. We have to be brutally honest in reference to what happens in Guyana. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, clearly.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Guyana has got two totally different political ideologies in the PPP Civic and APNURC. I say PNC. The PPP is, from what you saw from March 2nd to August 2nd, March 4th to August 2nd, they're highly indebted to the private sector. Their focus is on build, because remember now, with the oligarchs, you have to have the 1% or 2%, or in Guyana's case, maybe 0.1%, being made legitimate, probably billionaires in US dollars. That's the focus. How would you accomplish that? You cannot do that by focusing on a public service. Now, of course, those on your page, Mr. Norman, will be upset with me because, again, they want me to be an up.
They will also be educated. They will also be educated. Right. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. And that's my heart, to educate those who are willing to learn.
Yeah.
If a political party is indebted to the private sector, you have to remember Jerry Gavaya and these people. Mm-hmm. Jerry Gavaya, in my view, totally abandoned his, and he became a hardcore PPP Civic supporter. Why? Because you understand, business people understand that this current climate, what they stand to gain. Therefore, if the PPP were to invest in connecting this country by road, you make it easy for the private sector to thrive. So the focus has to be here. How do we develop Guyana so that the private sector, in which you find the oligarchs, and for those who are watching, for these wealthy businessmen who want to own everything in this country, including you, you have to have a situation where the government facilitates their benefit. The second truth that people not want to hear is this: the public sector is, for the greater part, made up of Afro-Guyanese. And in perception, APNU AFC supporters. Why would the PPP Civic make them their focus? When on one hand, if you inject money into infrastructure, the private sector booms, the henchmen benefit, and it would appear as if Guyana is growing economically. But if you invest in the public sector, you have sentiments that you've done well for us as a people, but there's no economic benefit. The truth is that the PPP is brave enough to show you exactly what they're about. They are about building the private sector because that's where the money will be for their friends. And so what you'll find is there'll be road projects that come on stream. We may have 2 billion or 3 billion Guyana dollars or more being spent on a road project, and their friend would be the contractor or a subcontractor. And no private sector, no public sector person can have the ability to bid for such a contract. But there'll be 5,000 jobs created. But who got the contract? Harman doesn't want to face reality. Harman wants political support from public sector employees. The reality is, and I close, that Granger and his party never took the time to develop the small man in terms of contractors into powerhouses. What they did was they made it difficult for even the small men in Guyana, in terms of Afro-Ghanaian contractors, to thrive. They made it worse in the name of being wiping out, what do you call it? Granger's catchphrase. Corruption. So to wipe out corruption, to stamp out corruption, you have forensic audits, and persons are told to go home. And that's how you stamp out corruption. You can't account for $2 billion, just go home.
Wow.
This PPP civic government is going to show Granger how you produce power economically. And then they're going to turn to the public sector to say, now here is a little biscuit for you. And thank me for giving me the biscuit. And because of the general construct of the public sector, they be clapping and saying, yes, you did more for us than Granger. Not realizing the disrespect that comes their way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Apostle. And I'm being very honest. We're wrapping up in 10 minutes, and therefore, Bevon, I will let you come in on this first on this next topic. But you please be aware of the time so that we can share it amongst us. The question here is: are we witnessing a return to the dark days of pre-2015, when extrajudicial killings, lawlessness, and corruption gripped the nation? And I want to, as of course we would have known, some of us were young when the PPP entered office. I spent a lifetime fighting the struggle against the PPP, human rights and all those other violations. It was the darkest period in my lifetime. I have seen so many black people killed. I've seen so many young women raped. There's been no justice for the families. I've seen murders. I've seen shallow graves that families were, I've seen people who never were brought back to their families. We've seen in those days where there was no incentive to education. Drug lords were the people on top, or you could have been as ignorant as a fish. But once you had money, you could ride a motorbike, you could drive a nice car. You got the best women who work in the bank, the teachers. Lawlessness prevailed. There were drug dealers who and criminals, not only drug, and criminals who were in bed with women in parliament back in those days. That's the power that they had. And no justice could have come out of anything. We saw the slaughter of Guyanese, and not only African Guyanese, but a lot of other ethnic groups that got no justice. It lives with me to this day, and it broke my heart when we struggled and won an election after 23 years, and it was squandered. It was literally squandered. But we will come back to talk about that because we are running out of time. The question, Bevon, when we look at what is happening over the past 6 or 7 months, I don't recall how many months since we were out of office, but it's somewhere around there. When we look at the manifestations of what is happening, young people, the police beating up people again, attacking members of parliament who want to enter parliament, a young black man was shot in his eye, at close range, point blank range. You understand? They said he stole something from somebody, and we're seeing the statements coming from the vice president that shows that maybe we are catapulting backward into that dark period. What are your thoughts?
First, we got to look at the foundation, how corruption is begins. Now, Hitler came into power by burning a building they call the Reichstag building and blame it on the people, it's the Jewish people, because he promised to bring back permanence to the Jewish people in Germany. In the United States of America, Donald Trump sells a racist ideology, and the people buy the ideology from him and say, we're going to support you. Now, when you drive fear in the people through murder and corruption, you are literally controlling the mindset of the man moving forward. And by that I mean this. You have the West, as Nigel mentioned earlier, who are in complete control of the governance of your country based upon your natural resources that you have beneath your soil. We spoke earlier about loans or money is being moved from place to place between the banking system. You have the higher power who is in control. So Jack Dio is going to implement some of the same systems that work in the West. And by that, corruption, murder, and fear in the public at large. Because the umbrella of democracy, so-called, is saying to you that it's okay, you could do that. Because we are protecting our interests in your country. So, once the country is in a condition like that, it would be difficult for us to conquer and remove that man and that power structure that he's building through the private sector, because the private sector are going to build so strong as oligarch ideas that they are going to be completely in control, and they are going to collectively support the PPP regime to continue being in power for years and years, and that's the authoritarian regime that always implement for the time the PPP government being put.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bevon Wint. We're going to go straight to Jason Benjamin, to look at this question. Are we witnessing a return to the dark days of pre-2015 when extrajudicial killings, lawlessness, and corruption gripped the nation? Jason Benjamin.
Thank you. Well, to piggyback first on what my colleague said, to answer your question, what we are seeing is that from the 23 years in power and then now returning again, history would have taught us a lesson. And it would only be unwise for us not to learn from that setting or that interpretation of the evidences before you to go contrary or to fool yourself, or foolhardy as we would say. Again, Phantom is back.
Phantom is back.
I'm going to repeat it again.
Phantom is back.
Phantom is back. The head of the security sector, or the head of securities for Bharat Jagdeo, that's the person who's in charge of that sector.
Wow.
The dark sector.
Wow.
And so, against this backdrop, we've already seen bodies showing up here, bodies showing up there, intermittently, and these are little things to instill fear in a society. More so, or I should say coupled with that, we already see how the Guyana police force, which should be an instrument to instill in or maintaining law and order, now fully corrupt, puppet, unable to execute a proper decision. You saw what happened with the ranks. And so, when we look at all of these factors, we recognize clearly that the opposition party had made a major blunder by allowing Barajagdio to control the narrative from 2015 right on to 2020. And so we find a false narrative is being laced throughout society. And so, last but not least,
Wow.
how are we going to move forward in such a setting? It really calls for, or let me remind people, I like to use Martin Luther King Jr. because he was a freedom fighter. He reminded us that change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but it comes through continuous struggle. And so, in order for us to cross that hurdle, again, we must speak truth to power. The conversation should never stop. Unity is strength, but of course, we need to each one teach one. I would go on that platform for now, but Phantom is there. Don't be
Phantom is
fooled.
back. Very sad. Apostle Nigel London, you would have heard from Bevon Wint and our dear brother Jason Benjamin, an academic and also a former military officer. The question is directed now. Are we witnessing a return to the dark days of pre-2015 when extrajudicial killings, lawlessness, and corruption gripped the nation?
I must bring to the remembrance of those what I said in May, and now the preacher in me is really coming out here. In May, I said that Guyana will face or be led by fear. Of course, that person said I was a false prophet. I think the person now realized a few months later what I meant. Because it said plainly, if Granger had won, Guyana would be afraid because of sanctions that were threatened. If PPP wins, you'll be afraid because of the terror that you'll be expecting. The reality is that Guyana is being governed at this time by fear. The evidence is that there is a systematic strategy that is almost fail-proof, in that if you drive fear into people, there is the high possibility exists that they are not going to retaliate because they're going to assess the power of the one who's driving the fear into them and their ability to challenge that power. Finally, let us not forget that Granger in 2020, 19 into 20, the APNO, I should say, campaigned on fear. So let's call it what it is. They said, instead of speaking to their accomplishments and focusing on what they were doing, which were very good things, programs and the like, no, their focus, I don't know who advised them, but their campaign focus was, if you vote for the PPP Civic, they're going to kill you all. If you tell me that for months and send someone to the poll with fear in mind, what do you think will happen now? So the country is being governed under the umbrella of fear. Whether phantom is present or absent, person is still afraid. And this fear that is over this nation cannot be removed by the perception that you have a weak leader facing Jagdio and the PPP. Never happened. Never. Because press conferences do not address tyranny or tyranny. Writing letters do not address people being shot in their faces by police officers or wherever else it is. And the truth is, let me say this, the entire Guyanese police force is not corrupt. All you need are a few bad officers to appear to be agents of the PPP, and the PPP would accomplish their objective already, if they have one, to drive fear and use to the police force. And that's exactly what you're hearing now. Granger has lost, or the APNFC have lost, all confidence in reference to their ability to protect their own people. All.
Apostle Nigel London, speaking to Voice of the Diaspora. So many people are tuning in. It seems as if people don't want the program to close, but we have to close. What I will do is I will try in the very near future to bring back this same panel, maybe in the next 2 weeks, to continue on the subjects, on the topics that we did not discuss. This is, it is remarkable with the amount of, persons commenting on this program, and so we're wrapping up now, and this is wrapping up. 30 seconds, Jason, to say to the viewers in closing what you want to say. 30 seconds, Bevon Wint, and literally 30 seconds, Apostle Nigel London, and I mean 30 seconds to wrap up. Go ahead, Jason Benjamin.
Thank you. Yeah, to the entire Guyanese populace and to other people in the diaspora, I just would like to remind everyone that for Guyana to move forward, we need to come to that place of truth speaking to power. And we have lots of educated youths in society, but of course, no jobs. And so there is economic starvation in the Black society, and we cannot sit back and allow it to remain that way. Else, we could have lost eternity. And so, what I'm calling on you for is to find the time to read yourself into things, and more so, listen to others, learn a trade. You need to get out of this. If you can read, teach, help each other. And so, against that backdrop, we can help one another in the meantime to cushion the effects. If we are to stand on our own, then we lose. And so, what we really need to take Guyana forward is strong leadership. And against that backdrop, I end by saying simply, as Martin Luther King Jr. would said, the time is always right to do the right thing. And lastly, our lives begin to end the day we become silent on issues that matter. Thank you.
Jason Benjamin, thank you. Bevon Wint, you have 30 seconds to wrap up. What would you like to say to the Guyanese people in the diaspora and at home?
Well, I would like to say it's simple. We need a few reforms in Guyana. We need constitutional reform, we need justice reform, and we need education reform. It could be the foundation to move Guyana forward in the 21st century.
Thank you very much.
We have so many natural resources coming out of that earth, the soil, that some of the resources could go back to finance some of those programs. We just have to understand how money is being appropriated through the budget, to local government, to regions, leadership positions in different parts of the country, how money is being distributed is most important. That would come through education reform. So the citizens at large would understand with a $383 billion budget, that money should be appropriated efficiently and effectively throughout the 10 regions of Guyana, and you could challenge the leadership in those regions as to how the money is being spent. Once you understand that, half of the problem is being solved, because education is going to put you in that type of position so you could have meaningful dialogue and have a seat at the table so that they can hear exactly what you have to say. Because the problem is the electorate, with the demographic shift from 18 to 65 or how old you are, you still have that type of opportunity to go in, make your voice be heard, and you could convince others to make a difference, because they have a majority electoral system in Guyana, where if you have one vote more than the other party, you actually win. And we have to also factor in the other three races that we have in Guyana, the Portuguese, etc., etc.
Thank you very much, Bevon Wint. Apostle Nigel London, your closing remarks.
Let me say thank you for once again inviting me. You take great risks when you do this. I appreciate your courage. And I'm certainly thankful for the others who were here in discussion. To the Guyanese, I say to you that we are still alive, and for as long as you're alive, you still have the ability to do that which wisdom dictates. Once again, thank you so much. I look forward to speaking to you again if Yahweh wills.
Thank you to Apostle Nigel London, Mr. Bevon Wint, and Mr. Jason Benjamin. Thank you for being on Voice of the Diaspora, and I hope that we will reconnect here sometime in the near future to discuss issues pertinent to the development of our country. I am remarkably appreciative of your presence here tonight, and I'm remarkably appreciative for the viewers who have tuned in and for those who have been commenting all night on this program. I want to thank you very much, viewers, because without you, this program is nothing. Thank you, gentlemen, and do have a good night.